When compared to many other leaders targeted by the CIA, Whitlam and Wilson got off easy. The CIA attempted to assassinate several dozen leaders during the Cold War. Oftentimes, they succeeded.
La gran humanidad ha dicho basta y ha echado a andar, y su marcha de gigantes ya no se detendrá hasta conquistar la verdadera independencia.
This is Fort Detrick, Maryland. This once secret facility was home to CIA experiments with drugs like LSD. It was also an armory for the agency's executive action capability, a program begun under the Eisenhower administration for disposing of unwanted foreign leaders. Some of the plots called for lethal poisons that were manufactured here. Dr. Everett Hennell, a microbiologist at Fort Detrick for 3 decades, worked in association with the CIA.
These are what we call Class 3 cabinet systems. They're gas-tight systems for working with almost complete safety with any infectious diseases, toxins, things such as the shellfish toxin. They're very toxic indeed, particularly when highly purified. And I understand that these could be placed on steel needles and fired with air guns into an animal and induce death almost immediately. So that they were apparently a very effective, or could be a very effective type of covert weapon.
Among the most disturbing CIA documents from the Cold War period is the agency's how-to guide on assassination. Beginning with the ironic disclaimer that murder is not morally justifiable, it goes on to state that killing a political leader whose burgeoning career is a clear and present danger to the cause of freedom may be held necessary. Persons who are morally squeamish should not attempt it. From there, the guide highlights potential methods. The simplest local tools are often the most efficient. A hammer, a screwdriver, a fire poker, a kitchen knife, a lampstand, or anything hard, heavy, and handy will suffice. A length of rope or wire or a belt will do if the assassin is strong and agile. For secret assassination, either simple or chase, a contrived accident is the most effective technique. When successfully executed, it causes little excitement and is only casually investigated. The most efficient accident is a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface. Elevator shafts, stairwells, unscreened windows, and bridges will serve. Falls into the sea or swiftly flowing rivers can suffice if the subject cannot swim. Arson can cause accidental death if the subject is drugged and left in a burning building. Reliability is not satisfactory unless the building is isolated and highly combustible. If the subject drinks heavily, morphine or a similar narcotic can be injected at the passing out stage, and the cause of death will often be held to be acute alcoholism. Puncture wounds of the body cavity may not be reliable unless the heart is reached. The heart is protected by the rib cage and is not always easy to locate. Absolute reliability is obtained by severing the spinal cord in the cervical region. This can be done with the point of a knife or a light blow of an axe or hatchet. Another reliable method is the severing of both jugular and carotid blood vessels on both sides of the windpipe.
But the officers of the CIA do it because they love this country. We believe in a free and open society, and we deeply believe in upholding the laws and the values of this society. That's why we defend it, so that, in the words of my immigrant father, we can pass those values on to our children.
What sort of philosophy could possibly justify such carnage? During the Cold War, the official justification was to prevent the spread of communism and to promote what was termed the national interest.
What does national interest mean to you? If you have the feeling that there is some document that is revised every year or every couple of years, some document that exists in the U.S. government that is headlined U.S. national interests, and every year or every other year this is gone over carefully by groups of people high in the government and approved, these are our national interests. That never, ever once happens. Every single administration has and is able to make up as it goes along what it thinks the U.S. national interests are. Every single individual who works in the government may very well have in his own mind a list of what he thinks the national interests of the country are.
Neither the phrase national security nor the phrase national interest has real meaning, other than to be a political tool for keeping the public uninformed. Essentially, the elite, in its ignorance and in its obsessive desire to maintain secrecy and not be accountable to the public, seeks simple explanations. They seek reasons that they can use as a jingle that will allow the public to believe in what they're doing or to ignore what they're doing. What most Americans don't realize is that we, the people, are being held accountable by foreign publics for what is done in our name.
Almost immediately after the CIA's founding, the national interest was revealed to be a highly flexible frame of reference. In the coups against Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran and Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, neither country had communist governments nor any links to the Soviet Union. What they did have were leaders who threatened to nationalize major industries, thereby threatening the profits of Western corporations. In Iran, it was oil. In Guatemala, land.
I'm John Perkins, and I'm a former economic hitman. What we economic hitmen did essentially was to create the world's first truly global empire. I was recruited by the NSA while I was attending Boston University back in the 60s. They put me through a series of tests, including lie detector tests, psychological tests, and in that process, they determined that I had the potential for being a good economic hitman. They also discovered a number of weaknesses in my character that would make it fairly easy for them to hook me into doing this job. And so they offered me a job as a trainee. And it's interesting, you know, when you accept a job like that with the NSA, they don't tell you exactly what you're going to be doing. They tell you that for the next year or so, you're going to be training, and then at the end of that period of time, they'll really determine what you're going to be doing. But ultimately, I ended up becoming an economic hitman. We did it by using many different means, but perhaps the most common was to identify a third world country with resources that our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from an organization like the World Bank or one of its sisters. But that country never actually received the money. Instead, the money went to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country, like power plants and industrial parks, things that would help the very rich people in that country, as well as our own corporations, but not the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity or don't have the skills to get jobs in industrial parks. And yet the whole country, would end up holding a huge debt, such a big debt that they couldn't possibly repay it.
When I lose, I pay, and when I win, I expect to get paid. I don't ask anybody to trust me, and I don't trust anybody. Big shot or penny ante chiseler.
But I tell you, I haven't got it. If I had, I'd give it to you. Now, don't be like that, Blackie. Give me a couple of days and...
So at some point, we economic hitmen go back and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money, can't pay your debts, sell us your oil real cheaply, or vote with us on the next critical UN vote, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq. And in that way, we've created this empire. On the few occasions when we economic hitmen fail, the jackals go in, and these are people who will overthrow governments or assassinate the leaders of the countries that didn't accept the loans. I failed as an economic hitman with Jaime Roldos, the president of Ecuador, and Omar Torrijos of Panama, And because I failed to corrupt them, failed to bring them around, failed to get them to take on these loans that were so destructive to their countries, they were both assassinated by CIA-supported jackals. The words economic hitmen and jackal are kind of tongue-in-cheek words. We use them, but it's like the word spy or snoop or spook or even CIA agent. People don't really use any of those terms. If you're a true CIA agent, spy, you may talk about it tongue-in-cheek, but you've got a fancier title like attaché, commercial attaché at some embassy. We economic hitmen all had fancy titles too. My title was chief economist. But we would use this term economic hitmen tongue-in-cheek. And the jackals, usually people who work for private, what they call security firms, or a company that'll have a semi-legitimate contract with some branch of the government to do something such as protect our personnel in an embassy overseas, or maybe protect a media crew overseas, and they'll be paid to do that, but there'll be one person in that organization whose money's coming through these other channels. And sometimes the channels are what they call the black box. Money is from the CIA. The money coming through these channels to hire this one person who is essentially an assassin. On the few occasions when the jackals and the economic hitmen both fail, then we send in the military. When you have an empire, you have to ask yourself, who's the emperor? Well, an emperor is someone who's not elected, doesn't serve a limited term, and doesn't report to anyone. We do have a group of people that I call the corporatocracy, which are the people who run our biggest corporations, who do fit that definition. They're not elected, they don't serve a limited term, and they don't report to anyone. They like to say they report to their boards of directors, but they're all on each other's boards of directors, and the boards of directors basically rubber stamp what the CEO wants to do. So this is the modern equivalent of the emperor. They're all driven by one single motive, one goal, and that is to maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs. And in heading for that goal, they've created a world that's very dangerous, very unfair, unsustainable, a world that I certainly don't want to pass on to my grandson.